We're live.
Great. All right. Thank you, Michael. All right. So today, this is the Node.js user feedback team. And today is an internal team meeting. We're going to be looking at some of the programs we have in flight and preparing for the enterprise use case user feedback session that we'll be hosting here on the 16th of August. So we shifted, excuse me, from our normal Friday cadence to make sure that the folks are able to join. The downside, the upside of being on Friday is it fits nicely in my schedule. Downside, the downside of Friday is that 9 a.m. Pacific time slot. It means that it's afternoon on the East Coast, and worst of all, for our European members, it's Friday evening, right? So Mihai's getting ready to go to the club, and
7 p.m.
So we're Ahmed, who's going to be heading up. Ahmed's on his way back from Node Summit right now. So Ahmed Nasri of TELUS is going to be leading that session and hosting that one. So we're shifting and opening up the time slot to the leader that we have for that group, like we've done with the tooling group. So excited about that, and really happy to support the enterprise use case and get some more community and discussion around that. So today's agenda is pull this up so everyone has that in front of them. Go ahead and show this to everybody. Share. Today's agenda is to follow up on our promises group that we're supporting. So the promises team inside the Node.js project has been working on getting feedback, and we're tracking towards setting up a survey, much like we did with the benchmarking working group. So per meeting that we've had, Benjamin has been working through some of the potential issues there, and let's go ahead and have a look together today and see where they're at. So primary role in the workplace, not debugging issues. I am the person that debugs issues, and DevOps, ops. I debug issues. I don't debug issues. All right. So there's a strong bent towards are you debugging issues?
Well, I think part of that was the discussion we had last week in terms of we wanted to make sure we were getting a good sense of whether people were involved in debugging production issues or not.
Yep.
So I think that's where that came from for sure.
No, that makes sense. I'm not seeing, sort of some of the categorization of folks like site reliability engineer. I assume that fits in DevOps operations. It's kind of a modern operations role with a little bit more of a programming bent. Is there anything else that we're missing in terms of gaining understanding of this? I might I think it might be interesting to engage not just, so this is a technical point of view from a technical contributor, but one of the objections that I've heard over the last few years as we've approached promises is how this bubbles up into sort of the leadership roles, where if the engineering manager can't get the feedback from debugging those production issues, then we hear about it more in the boardroom, and from folks that aren't feeling the pain directly, but are experiencing it at a platform level indirectly. I wonder if we should propose having a category that would include an interested party, but not a directly impacted party.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think getting the more perspective. So I don't know if you want to add to a couple of the questions, like I am a something else in that list, right?
Let's see. I don't want to edit.
Yeah, don't edit that, but you can add in, like, in terms of the primary role, you can say, here are some others that we should have.
Okay, so I put respective leaders of operations and engineering as respective roles there. Okay, so next question: which do you use most often in order to write async code? Promises without async await, promises, this is such an esoteric insider question. Promises with async await, Node.js standard airbacks, and I don't use any of the above. What about like just vanilla promises?
I think that may be later on.
Okay. But isn't I mean, I know that the enlightened way of writing promises is async await.
Well, okay, but actually, if you look at the question, it says promises without async await, which would be non-async await.
Oh, okay, promises. That's the first one. Okay,
yeah.
Promises without. Okay, got it.
Look how many people. So they say like 26 people. They say they are approving on this. So
yeah, this is
it's a big number,
right? Right.
The one that you might is both, right?
Right.
So maybe we should add that one as a suggestion. Like, I use promises with both async await and without async await, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Sounds good.
Do you use async iterators for await loops with streams? Binary question. I don't even know what that is. For await loops with streams. That sounds really nasty.
Those are very specific.
It's a really nodey touch point there.
But I think there's some very specific questions they want to pull out in terms of usage patterns because of performance, and so I think that's that's one of those.
Right. And I think that interop between streams, since Node evolved with streams as being the kind of higher order callback data flow, having this new paradigm that we can use, but do they interop well? Yeah, that makes sense. All right, next one. Which of the following tools do you use in order to debug Node.js core at least once a week? Node Inspector, or an IDE with using Node Inspect, long stack trace, like what's provided in Bluebird, printed stack traces with native promises, with an example being Mocha errors, core dumps, and LLDB, GDB, and the good old console log. At least once a week.
Yeah, I think the thing is, it's a bit of a challenge because if you scroll down, I think somebody may have already commented about that.
The at least once a week is too aggressive. Yeah, I mean, this is a little bit of spearfishing, looking for folks that are really really interested, that's good. But this also impacts folks that hey, it's been a year since we've had a major production issue, and holy heck, there's one. Now what? Yep. Now what do I do?
Because going through the issue, I mean, there's a whole bunch of comments. The discussion at the end is that we should move it to a Google Doc so that we can start integrating into like something that people can actually look at and see the current state. And
right. Okay, handling for unhandled rejection. That's a pretty straightforward, promise-related concern, and getting signal on where that's going. Use promise and async hooks. Nice. I don't know what async hooks are. That's great. And this is an open answer question. Right. Good. So that's looking solid. Performance of Node.js promise is sufficient for you. These are a bit wordy. I think if the responses were, and in fact we got much lower signal here. I think this question probably suffers if we can get more of the question and less of the answers being long explanations.
I think Benjamin in this particular, I think what he's trying to tease out is the belief that promises are still slow.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And because he hears that from people, even though he's been trying to send the message that the ones in core are actually quite good.
Right.
And also, I guess maybe you're suggesting breaking this out into two questions, but the other one is like the trade-off of am I willing for them to be a bit slower if I could have better debuggability?
Right. Let me see if I can. So use the confused. That seems negative.
I don't know. I mean, what does that do, right? Like,
I'm gonna put the hurrah there just to state that. Hi, Gary.
I guess I would either put like a comment that says what to adjust, or I just promoted him, although it's still in a funny state now. Okay, there we go. Now it's updated.
Okay, so Okay. Promises. Okay, discussion.
Do we have a count how many questions there are?
So that's, approaching, rough count in my head about 10. Which gets us about to the point of a survey. Though I think we probably want to go with a little bit more.
Double maybe, make it.
Yeah, double 20, 10 to 20. Let's see. So Netflix has been one of the big advocates for going slow on promises over the years. Though I think that trend is shifting. They've been really unhappy with their ability to debug, especially in postmortem. So the postmortem debugging tooling, LL Node, and MDB style core dump functionality has been one area where promises have been the most opaque.
Michael, do we have a limitation for these types of surveys? I mean, like between how many questions and how many?
I don't think there's any fixed limits in terms of that. The main feedback we got was to make the questions as specific and as closed as is reasonable. Otherwise, so like this is I think some good feedback in terms of like how do you debug, so getting more specific information about how that's done, how frequently. So yeah, I mean it was mostly about trying to make things which are quantifiable. Obviously leaving some open-ended up questions, because sometimes you want to find things that you don't have the preconceived notions of, but I don't think there's any, they're not going to tell us 25 questions are too many and 20 are enough. So
okay.
Yeah, I don't think it needs to have a minimum amount. It's
true.
Whatever the number is that we need to capture the question, cover the area that we want. In that, if it's short, it's easier for people to fill out as well, right?
I agree. I just don't. I don't think we've. I think we've hit, and I think Kim does a good job of elaborating a little bit. I think we've hit with Ben's first pass. A baseline of sort of technical questions, and I think there's a little bit more context outside of someone with as deep a context of an understanding of promises as Benjamin has, and we need to connect the dots to folks who are leveraging promises, passionate about promises, but not necessarily in the weeds debugging. The end user who is advocating, for example, that Node.js core leverage promises more deeply, doesn't necessarily come at that from a debuggability point of view, right? They want it to be more debuggable, but ultimately they just want promises to work and work well.
Yeah, and that's where I think a number of the questions here are around the who is answering, so we can kind of try and pull that out and say, yeah, okay, we got this kind of answer from this constituency and this other kind of answer from a different one, and overall this is how it looks. So
right, generators. So adjacent concepts like generators and observables, that's a good one. RxJS style things, and Koa. I know PayPal is using Koa a lot more lately, and Netflix makes extensive use of RxJS. So some of the adjacent abstractions. Interesting. I don't know if we want to go down that path or not, but I think at least gathering some signal, for additional exploration, right? There are other topics like generators, observables that are causing you pain. Might be a good addition to this. Ooh.
Yeah, basically they did an internal survey at Netflix already. Mm-hmm. So there's some discussion of that.
Great.
Oh,
Julian's at Netflix. Great. Yep. Sorry. That's good news. Makes me happy.
So I think really on this one, like the ending discussion is that it's going to be moved out to a Google Doc, which I think will make it easier to refine and edit the questions into a form where people can comment and type, here's what we think it should be, as opposed to having to read through the whole issue.
Right.
And I think that'll make it easy to look at, here's the pictures as a holistic. And so if we can, it sounded like maybe this week that'll happen. So we should, all of us, if we can go look and comment there, that would be good.
Yep.
Hopefully then maybe, by our next meeting, it's in the right shape and we can, talk to Greg about getting it out there.
So, let's also reach out and look for avid promise users, not necessarily debuggers, but just folks that are, engaged, or, I know a few folks that are heavy promise users, and aren't necessarily on the, debugging or, analysis side of things. And, I'll try to get their perspective on, what is an end user experience? What is the expected end user experience, and how can we use that to capture here? Because, above and beyond, providing a good debugging experience, I think we need to help the folks involved in promises capture more signal around end user expectations for promises to help advocate changes to the platform. Okay, so I'll stop the share there. Good. All right. So this is lining up nicely, and we should be able to the 17th we'll have the kickoff for the meeting for enterprises, the enterprise, and the meeting following that we should be able to sit down, maybe have a session with Greg over at the Node.js Foundation to go through the questions.
16th anyway.
Sorry, 16th. Sorry. I remember the cadence in Friday. Sorry.
So the 16th is the so that's 2 weeks out, right?
Yes.
Then our next meeting after that, because I'm just wondering if our next meeting that I actually see on the calendar is
31st.
The 31st. I'm wondering if that's a bit late, because that's almost a month from now, right?
Right.
I'm hoping that it sounded like if we could close on the we should probably be ready for the questions being ready in about a couple of weeks, I'm guessing. I don't know if we need a meeting or anything like that, but we should keep an eye on the issue, and if they're ready in a couple weeks, at least start getting the input from Greg and the people at the foundation who may have some, we'll probably have feedback on the questions themselves as well.
So I'm going to just put something on my calendar and I'll invite you all to, but it won't be a meeting,
Sure.
to just review the document and invite Greg to have a look. Yep. That way we can then be prepared for the 31st to sit down and maybe, when we invite Greg, we can ask him to say, hey, would you mind plugging this into SurveyMonkey so we can review that content on the 31st together.
Yep.
Great. Okay.
I guess we should also follow up with Chris just to see. I'm not aware that we have another meeting scheduled for the
tooling.
The tooling side.
Right.
Would so you take the action to follow up with him?
Awesome. Okay. All right, so that is on your calendar for the 17th. Great, and I'll take the action item of creating a meeting issue for Ahmed to anchor off of, for the enterprise. I don't see an issue for that. So as we're inviting folks to come engage in that. It's helpful to have that ahead of time. So I'll go ahead and take care of that when we wrap.
Definitely, yeah. So we can start promoting it a bit.
Right. I'll create that. Any other items for discussions or things we should take care of?
Yeah, I do have something because we talk about survey. So can you please go on a README file, on our README file? So over there, it's I've seen something looks kind of old. So under the projects, the last bullet item, it's manage. No, I'm sorry. The above one. We are currently preparing 2017 benchmarking workgroup survey. That's kind of old. I know we are not going to modify the README file all the time, but if you guys have anything in mind, probably we need to modify that.
That should just be removed.
Or just remove, just remove the item. It's old.
Well, it's old. It is an example that could help project members to do. So I think if we just change it to, we're currently working on it. And for example, we prepared.
Yeah, that's okay. As a one-time, we shouldn't have status on the README though.
Okay.
Right? Because otherwise we have to update it every time. But I agree with, as an example, we completed this, right? That is an example. It makes sense to me, but not as a, what are we doing now? Because that's the issue.
Yeah. I mean,
and the next bullet, maybe we should just delete as well.
Right. Though, Mihai, if you're going to take the action for those two, if you could separate them, because if we post the removing that line, we can use that as a discussion point for and closure point for that enterprise advisory group that we need to come to closure on.
What might be useful is to add in the list of groups we have there.
Nice.
The tooling, tooling enterprise group, and
promises.
General, yeah, but not promises, because I think that we've said that's sort of like a support for a different. But the tooling and the enterprise groups and the general group are three ongoing efforts that we have.
Yes. Agreed.
Which does remind me, I guess the next action on the general one was, Dan, did you volunteer to set up something in terms of what was it? What's it called again? The virtual meetup, the meetup count and stuff.
Yes, I did.
Maybe if there was an open, I don't think there's an issue open for that. It'd be useful to have the issue if you open an issue and just put your status for how far along we are there, right?
Great.
Because I think once we have that created,
you need the
then
anchor.
We've got to say, well, when, and maybe we can do that now. Like, when do we want to target the first virtual meetup? And get the agenda for it, right? I'm thinking like myself, my thought would be like sometime in September, because summer's not necessarily a great time, but
right. And that gives enough lead time, since it's a new thing to go and get everybody lined up.
So I'm thinking like mid to late September, but I think having an issue that says we're doing this, we already created the meetup, figuring out sort of what we want the general agenda to be, because I think we want to make sure we have like feedback in there somewhere about how we weave it in, and if you could create that issue and then tag it, to at least show up on our agenda as something to make sure we keep pushing forward. It's too easy to forget things on the side.
Absolutely. No, thank you. Right. Okay. Great. And we said that would be 5 p.m. Eastern time.
I think that's what we picked. Yeah.
On a Wednesday. Recall correctly.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Okay, that looks good.
Thanks God I'll be in States then.
Nice. And we're not going to get too fancy. I think we could actually use Zoom meeting in its webinar capacity for the first time, right?
Yeah, no, I think we were talking about, yes, we figured we could just use a Zoom webinar, and that lets us stream, lets us do everything. If numbers become an issue, then we'll figure out what to do.
Right. Good problems. And I think we're, close to 100.
Yeah, I think that's what my memory. It was a pretty high number, right? So.
Great. Okie doke. Any other topics for discussion before we're up?
I think that's good for a summer week.
Great.
I guess I may not see you guys since the meeting is
right. That's right.
Next week while I'm on holiday, or the 2 weeks when I'm on holiday, I might not see you for a little while. So if there's anything like that needs more attention urgently, let me know. But
thank you. We will try not to bother you. Excellent. Have a wonderful vacation then.
Yep. Yeah, it's still a few weeks away. Just our meeting is. So okay, talk to you guys later.
All right,
Okay.
have a good one.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.